Hi, my name's Brian, and welcome to another episode of Everything Suffolk. As always, we're joined by County Executive Ed Romaine, and today we're joined by a special guest, a Smithtown native and Vietnam veteran, the Honorable Judge John Toomey. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome, Brian. My pleasure.
We're going to be here talking about a little bit about your experience. Obviously, we have our event coming up on March 29th, which you're the guest speaker of. And Judge, I was hoping you could just guide us through a little bit of your time in Vietnam, how you got there. And,
Sure.
Yeah. Well, we
Got there by
Uncle
airplane.
Sam said, I need you.
exactly.
But I grew up not far from this building, probably about 3 or 4 miles north of here in Smithtown. Went to Smithtown High School, graduated in 1965. Started college for, a couple of months, didn't work out. Ended up, out of college, I was working, and I was 18, so they were usually drafting about 19. So after the summer of 66, I said I might as well just go in the Army. So I went to the draft board and asked them to move my draft up, and I left in September of 66 and went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for about 6 months, basic training and infantry training. And then in March of 67, I left for South Vietnam, left for Vietnam.
And when you got to Vietnam, where were you originally stationed?
When I got there, we're all infantry trainees and were replacements for soldiers that were rotating home for the most part or got injured or killed. And I went to the 1st Infantry Division and stayed there for 12 months. And we operated on the Cambodian border, northwest of Saigon.
That's where you did your jungle training too, right?
I didn't do jungle training. Our jungle training was more or less on-the-job
Oh,
training. Yeah, it was Fort
jungle?
Jackson. They had some training, but it was it was in February. It's actually cold in South Carolina in February, believe it or not. So I didn't feel
Really?
the jungle. But we were in Colombia. It was at night. It would definitely get chilly, a lot chillier than Vietnam.
Backing up a little bit to stateside, how did your family react to your draft notice, you going over?
Nice that my parents wanted me to stay in college. They were not happy with me going in the Army, especially it was a perilous time, and they were accepting of it, but certainly completely upset. It's something that I didn't realize it at the time, but I think as you have children, it would be like I would think one of the worst things that could happen is your 18-year-old kid is going off into the United States Army or Marine Corps or something like that while there's a full-fledged war going on. I mean, it's I didn't understand it as much then as I could have empathy for it now. It was probably not a good situation for them.
When you're young, you don't think too many bad things are going to happen to you.
You're pretty, confident, naive, I guess.
Right.
And then what was the mood in Smithtown and Suffolk County of that time during the war?
Yeah. Well, I left when I got out of high school in 1965 and into 1966. I mean, Smithtown was not New York City. I'd say it was very, not I don't want to say pro-war, but they're certainly accepting of anything the government did or said, and everybody really believed in supporting the war in Vietnam at that time, especially in 1966. I mean, at the time there was no drugs, there was nothing. It was a very it could have been Utah for It was very laid back area, and I'd say there was no anti-war protests or anything like that in 1966.
And then as that progressed, did that change in?
I would say by 1968, when I actually came back from Vietnam in March of '68, I didn't see too much. When I got out of the Army and went back to college in September of 1968, yeah, you could see there was definitely a change where people weren't that, into the war. That people were much more anti-draft. People wanted to avoid the draft or wondering what's the sense in going over there, losing your life, losing a limb, losing a son. And I think there was somewhat of a change,
Can we talk a little about the welcome you received when you came back from Vietnam?
If everything you've heard about, I'll talk about in the speech on Saturday, a lot of Vietnam veterans were not received, very well when they came home. I mean, they really wanted dignity and respect, and they really got far less than that, from an angry and a confused nation. But I can't say I ever had anybody, say anything to me or anything untoward or anything like that. But, I've heard stories, read stories, but how much of it went on, I really don't know. But I never experienced it myself.
Yeah.
And when I came home, I was 20 years old. I was out of uniform. I think I still looked like I was 17 or 18. So I went back on the college campus. You wouldn't noted
you
I was a
blended right
Vietnam.
in.
Yeah, I was a Vietnam veteran.
Where did you go to
and everything.
college?
I went to. I actually graduated from Stony Brook in 1972.
I bet
and,
there was a little bit of.
There was, but like I wasn't involved in it. I mean,
Right.
I lived off campus.
Right, it's like off to the side.
Yeah, I was, just getting an education. And I said when I got off the plane in, Seattle, Tacoma, state of Washington, I kind of walked off the plane. I left a lot of it, back there. I was kind of fortunate in that way.
Right.
I went back and got an education and started my life, or continued with my life. I think for me, it was a real, I don't know if it's a wake-up call, but I think I grew up in Vietnam. Like I just learned, I think it gave me a lot more confidence in what I could do, a lot more belief in myself, a lot more that, no matter what happens, it can't be as bad as what happened,
Right.
at that point. And I think it gives you, it gave me, and I can't speak for everybody naturally, but it gave me a feeling that things that I thought were impossible to do, you could do it. You could go to college, you could go to law school, you could do things, and without that, I'm not sure if I would have.
You graduated from Stony Brook. Where did you go to law school?
I actually went out west of Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It was cold up there.
It was. Yeah, it's funny. The day we graduated, I met my wife in college, and the day we graduated from college, actually the day we got married, so needless to say, we skipped the graduation. And then we left New York, went out to, lived in Minneapolis for 3 years, and then came back to Smithtown.
Cold in Minnesota, though.
It was in the winter, that's for
Yes,
sure, yeah.
During your time, you were part of Operation Junction City.
When I got to Vietnam, my division, my battalion was actually in the operation. So when we got, after you go through, you get processed into country, into Vietnam, and you get assigned to a unit. And then you join. When I joined my unit, my actual platoon, they're actually on the Cambodian border in Operation Junction City. And that was the end of. Probably the very end of March 1967, excuse me.
And you met, I have it somewhere in my notes, but you met someone who would later go on to become an advisor to President Nixon. Can you tell us about that experience?
What happened when we were there, I was in the 1st Battalion, 2nd Infantry, and the battalion right next was the 1st Battalion, 16th Infantry. And they had a lieutenant colonel leading that battalion, as all battalions led by lieutenant colonels. And just coincidentally, the first night I was in the field, they tried to get overrun, like about 2,000 North Vietnamese attacked the positions that we're in, most of it on the other battalion. And the battalion commander was a person by the name of Alexander Haig, and he was lieutenant colonel at the time. And the next morning we came by, and I mean, not to be too graphic, but there were hundreds of dead soldiers in the field. And Haig, who now I'm in the field 36 hours, something like that, a PFC, and the colonel's standing there. It wasn't our colonel; it was the colonel of the other battalion. And he said, "This is what you boys did last night," or something like that. And he told us this figure. He says, and I don't know if it's true. I'm sure it's not true, but he did say it. You killed 609 enemy soldiers last night. And it was a figure that I never used again in my life until I read that Colonel Haig had passed away, or General Haig, I guess at the time, had passed away. And when you Google the Battle of Apgu, APGU, or Alexander Haig, that when he talks about that battle, or Wikipedia, whatever it is, will talk about that battle, that number 609 comes up. It was the exact same number that he gave us on that morning. I think it was April 1st, 1967.
Wow.
And then after that, he became a colonel, became the brigade commander. Then he was a general, and the next thing you know, he was in Nixon's White House, and he was chief of staff in Reagan's White House when Reagan got shot, when he was on assassination attempt.
He was in charge.
He was in charge. That's what he said. He was in charge. I always wanted to meet him after that and say, the first night I met you, you were a lieutenant colonel, and 4 years later, you were a general of the army. I'm with you one night, and you get all these promotions. But, I didn't get the chance to say that to him.
Yep.
And then maybe moving into your law career a little bit, how did you go from lawyer to judge? What's the
From lawyer to judge?
yeah? What was the maybe the career trajectory that led you to running and all
Oh,
that?
so when I came back from Vietnam, it was a funny thing, just going back to 1 second. I remember I had a lieutenant, his name was Webster, he was from Chicago when I was in Vietnam. And he got really excited one day, yelling, being elated, really. He just got accepted to law school, University of Illinois Law School, something like that. I thought, oh man, that's really cool that this guy's going to law school. So I think I always had in the back of my mind, I'm going to be like Webster and go to law school. And so after college, I ended up going to law school, came back here, and practiced law in Smithtown for 25 years, and then had the opportunity to become a district court judge. And Ed Romaine was nice enough to swear me into that position so many years ago, and I took the opportunity and did that. And then while I was a judge for a couple of years, 5, 6 years, they realized that there was a lot of soldiers coming back, and Marines especially, from just servicemen coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they were having problems, and sometimes the problems would intersect with the criminal justice system. And it was the administrative judge at the time was a man named Lease, Judge Lease, and I think I was the only veteran.
Patrick Lease.
Yeah, Patrick Lease, the only
From Huntington. Conservative. That I recall.
He might have been, yeah.
He was.
He asked me if I would start the Veterans Court in Suffolk County, and I certainly said I would. And this was probably 2010 or 2011. I should remember that, but I don't. And I think it was then, and I started dealing with veterans, and a lot of them coming back with emotional problems, drinking problems, drug problems, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and it was manifesting itself in spousal abuse and not keeping jobs and stuff like that. So we started it up, and I was lucky we had a group that stepped forward and were mentors to each and every veteran, with the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 11 from Suffolk County, and they work very closely with the court. And we worked closely with the VA. We had a great social worker, a man by the name of Eric Boone, who also worked with us. And, we just started working on veteran issues. And I think when I started talking to these guys that were also Vietnam veterans, it was the first time in my life, and probably not my life, in 30 years or something like that, 40 years maybe, that I actually started thinking about Vietnam. But like I said, it was pretty much in my rearview mirror until then. And I think the greatest thing, I think, as a lawyer, as a judge, my greatest feeling of accomplishment, and that I actually did something, that really had an impact on people's lives, was the time that I was the presiding judge of the Veterans Court. I thought that was, it was just a great opportunity for me.
Helping veterans is what you're known for, Judge. Your court did great work on behalf of a lot of people whose lives were a little bit troubled because of their experience overseas, defending and fighting for this country. Some of them came back emotionally scarred. Some of them turned to drugs. Some of them had other injuries. Your court worked through that and was a special court just for veterans to understand what they were going through and how you could reach out to help them. You were known for someone as a veterans advocate, and whenever possible, you would make the law bend a little bit towards mercy. And I know the law is supposed to bend towards justice, but as a judge dealing with fellow veterans, you bent the law towards mercy. And that is always remembered by your fellow veterans who are appreciative that you sat in that bench.
Yeah, Ed, thank you for the kind words, but it was certainly, it was my honor to do so. And, we did, I think, helped a lot of people, turn their lives around. And at the time, it was only the second Veterans Court in New York State, one of the few in the United States of America. And now that, there's a lot. And later on, I was going around the country speaking to different veteran courts and, like different areas of the country, California, Maryland and stuff, and, tell them how we did it here in Suffolk County, but it was certainly, a great idea to start it. Now it's really doing well under Judge Pierce Cohalan, who's doing, an excellent job doing it.
How does hearing those types of cases, obviously it brought up the memories of your time in the service, but how does that personally affect you?
I don't, Brian, I'll tell you, I think for some reason, I was lucky and I came back from Vietnam unscathed mentally or physically. And it didn't emotionally bother me, but I think I could understand and have the empathy for what they were going through and their period of adjustment. And I've said this in other speeches I've done where when you first go in the Army, like September 7th, 1966, you swear to go in the Army and they just cut your hair, give you a uniform. Everything is just completely changed. But when you get out, you just leave. Like there's nobody there.
You're
to
leaving,
tell
go
you.
back to normal.
Yeah.
But not everyone had the emotional support to go back to normal. And there were people that, when they were in Vietnam, picked up bad habits, possibly drugs,
Sure.
possibly other things. And they came back. And even those who didn't pick up any bad habits over there were emotionally scarred by what they saw, because some people saw some very violent combat. And war is never pretty up front.
No.
And those who have been in very violent conflicts come back, that's something you don't forget about. And for some of these people, they were extremely troubled by it, and it affected their behavior in ways that brought them into the Veterans Court. And he's underplaying his role here. But as judge, he helped these people kind of reorient their lives back to normal. And so, Judge, you played a crucial role for many of the veterans who got into a little bit of trouble because of something that may have, you came back and you went on with your life. There were a lot of veterans that did not come back and went on with their life and could not get over their traumatic experiences. And for most of them, okay. But for some of them, they intersected, unfortunately, with the criminal justice system. And you came in and you tried to find a way to get these people back on the right path. And you talk about a lot of people in life. The ones that really matter are the people that help those in need, help them reorient themselves and get them back on the right track and make their life one that becomes one that's useful.
Sure.
And you did that. And you may not realize that or want to acknowledge that publicly, but those who served with you, those who observed you, said, wow, what a great job. They didn't call you John, they called you Jack. You know that. And they said, what a great job Jack did with this court, helping these veterans, because some of these guys were really troubled, and he helped cut through some of this and help them out and get them to reorient their lives. So thank you for your service to Suffolk and to the veterans of Suffolk County.
Like I said, it was my pleasure, Ed, and again, thank you for the kind words. But I had a lot of help doing it, and I always told them I didn't really help them. We just gave them the pathway to help themselves, to see what they could do and take it from there. And I said, we all got great satisfaction in helping them.
I know we've alluded to a little bit before, but the week of the theme of this week's event is Welcome Home. County Executive, could you go a little bit into why it is for some of the maybe younger listeners who had such an intimate knowledge of it?
This war ended 50 years ago, but it was a war that was being waged for probably 62 years. I figure we sent advisors over there and, early 60s, 61, 62, 63. And I think had President Kennedy lived, we would not have been involved in that type of war, because he was a skeptic of sending troops in, didn't think we should fight a land battle in Asia, and had followed Vietnam from the time he was a senator, and he was elected, I think it was 52 he was elected, 58. Yes, he was elected in 1952. And he beat the guy that was a senator there, who later became the ambassador to South Vietnam, Henry Cabot Lodge, if you remember him.
I do, yes, sir.
Yep. So, I mean...
He was also Nixon's running mate in 1960.
Yes, he was. He was in 1960, yes. So, but interestingly enough, Lyndon Johnson chose him to be the ambassador, and he advised Lyndon Johnson that he didn't think we could win this war, that it was more of a civil war. And, of course, then we we had the assassination of President Diem in, I think it was October, it might have been early November of 1963, which some people related to the assassination of the Kennedys. I don't know if that was true or not. But yeah, this was a war that started out, but it wasn't a war that we could win because it was an insurgency that was very difficult to control. And the only insurgencies that were ever successful was the one in Malaysia that they tried to do, and they were able to control that and not. We could not win in Vietnam, and people came to that conclusion, including the defense secretary at the time, Mr. McNamara, if you recall him.
Sure. I'm
sure as a drafty, you recalled him. And we just didn't know how to extricate ourselves from that. And in the end, we left Vietnam with people hanging on to helicopters because they knew what would happen with the change of administration. Now, you should ask, and today, hopefully, we have another guest speaker, which is in the other side of this room, Mr. Martino, who just came back from Vietnam.
That's right.
He spent 2 weeks over there. Obviously, as a tourist, in high-end hotels, not sitting in the bush and letting the rain fall on you whenever it would rain during the rainy season.
Absolutely.
So, which I'm sure you had to.
Oh yeah, infantry were in the rain for 6 months. Yeah. Whatever the monsoon season was, about 6 months.
And what's the one thing you learn in the keep your socks dry, keep a couple dry socks, right?
Right.
That's just what it was. So, but to have someone come back, have the experience, and then like so many people in this country, there's the advantages that this country offered. Go to college, and then go to law school, and then come back, have an active law practice, and then sit on the bench and then be asked to help veterans. You never know where life is going to take you. You never know. You think you're going in one direction. Life is full of surprises that sends you in another direction. But we're very honored to have you. And we can't wait to have you speak. And we want to welcome people home because they didn't get to welcome home. Because by the end of that war became extremely unpopular. So much so that, after Lyndon Johnson, President Nixon became president, and he decided to do what he called Vietnamization, which is turn the war over to Vietnam. Well, we could to South Vietnam, but we should have done that from the get-go, but they probably could not have won that from the get-go. And what's happened is that they lost that war, and North Vietnam prevailed, and we had to leave rather quickly at the very end. And the war was extremely unpopular for a variety of different reasons. And unfortunately, some of that rubbed off on people who served there in different areas. There are areas of this country that were extremely supportive of our veterans, and I would think Suffolk would be amongst them, but there were areas of this country where as the war became more unpopular, they became less supportive of our servicemen as they returned. So it's time to say, look, all the men and women that served over there served, most of whom were drafted, some of whom volunteered. But it's time to say, welcome home, because you helped defend your nation. It may not have been the war you wanted to be in, but you stepped forward, you raised your hand, I volunteer, I'll serve, or I got drafted, I'll come, and I won't object, no problem. But we lost a lot of people. We lost about 58,000 people in that war. And that was a tough war. That was a tough war. Can't think of too many other wars that were as divisive as that war, because most of the wars, with one possible exception with the War of 1812, with one possible exception, with a nation usually united behind its fighting men. And that was one. And the only war that I could think would be more bitter than that war was the Civil War, where we fought each other. So 50 years have gone by since that war has been over. More than 60, 65 years since that war started. Small, grew big. It's time to say to all those who served, thank you for your service. Welcome home. We appreciate you, because whenever people don't respond to the call, that's the end of our nation. So the people who responded, who served this country, thank you. They are special. And I think we have the highest amount of veterans in this state. I know that for a fact, in Suffolk County. And we have the second highest in the nation behind San Diego County. But in terms of Vietnam veterans, we're pretty close near the top there.
It might be. I really
We're
don't know.
pretty
I know,
close.
Yeah, with veterans, it's a very high population.
Yeah, and we want, because Suffolk County is a good place to live, and we want everyone who served their country to know that they are welcomed.
So, and just as a reminder, the event is March 29th, 11:30, right here at the H. Lee Dennison building, the north parking lot.
That's Saturday, March 29th, the H. Lee Dennison building. If you want to put it in your GPS, it's 100 Veterans Highway, Hop Park, New York. And we have a couple statues of the Vietnam War, some of the other wars, and at the Veterans Memorial Plaza right in front of the building. We're going to have a huge ceremony. His Honor is going to say a few remarks. I think we have a couple refreshments there, right?
There'll be something, yeah.
Now, well, we should talk about that, because sometimes, people get hungry and thirsty.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you both for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience.
Sure.
And thank you, County Executive, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.